Hi there, I'm Dave Inglis, host of the Chief Family Officer podcast, and I want to welcome you to this great episode with Ashley Chang. She's the CEO of Sundays, a remarkable organization who has a team of EAs who is totally committed to helping ambitious parents just like you take care of all of the details in their life so they can have higher quantities of high quality time doing the things that matter most to them. Believe it or not, this episode that we recorded while it was a few months ago was 10 days before Ashley had delivered her firstborn, and how lucky we were to be able to spend a few moments with her before this big transition as she begins her own family, to learn from her around some of the things that she's been observing working really well in the families that her team supports to build really great systems of living for everybody to be able to thrive. So I hope you enjoy this episode just as much as I did. Well, you have become, I would say, one of my favorite voices on LinkedIn. And I don't know about you, I've really started to spend a lot more time on LinkedIn, and I have different opinions every day, it feels like, about the content on there. But your voice is one that I continue to follow, in particular because you have such a unique perspective on a clientele, if you will, or a type of leader that I really care about. The type of leader who's got pressure on all sides. They're trying to have it all in life. They're really working at that intersection of family and work and self, if you want to include that too. And your perspective and the things that you share are just so meaningful. And I love learning from you on there. And I have to ask, now that you've kind of started Sundays to really help ambitious parents, do you feel like this is a calling or a career that you're in right now?
Definitely more of a calling. I think when
Yeah.
I wake up super excited to get to work on this every day. And when I talk to people who are starting new companies, I'm like, you have to find the thing that you care enough about that you're going to push yourself through things that are really hard to make it come to life. And for me, that is Sundays and what we're doing today.
I love it. And was there a particular point in time where you just knew this is what you had to do? Because in your family, it's quite unique where you're just about to have your first child. Not to say that not having kids doesn't have its challenges of being able to manage it all, but what was like the catalyst for you years ago when you thought, I want to go into this space of helping ambitious parents? I see this problem and I want to put a dent here. What was it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always been a problem that I have cared about. I shared on LinkedIn that I was inspired by my own mom, who was a computer scientist in the 80s. And then when she had kids, felt like she really had to choose between family and work because there wasn't support for doing both. And then
Mm,
I spent my early career in the tech industry and saw a lot of the smartest, most ambitious people that I knew still feel like they're running into all these barriers balancing family and work. And then I decided to leave, and I was actually exploring a whole bunch of different ideas, but kept coming back to this problem and how much I actually cared about solving it versus a lot of the other problems that I was exposed to. I was like, I could build a B2B SaaS company and raise a lot of money. But this is kind of like the problem that just kept resonating with me. I saw other companies building in it, and I was like, jealous of this building. And I was like,
yeah.
okay, that's a sign
That'd be a
that
good
this is
sign. Yeah.
that this is what I want to be doing. And then for myself, I didn't have kids yet, but I've always wanted to be able to have both a career and a family. And so a bit of this is me being like a very type A person. Like, what are the things that
Hmm.
people who actually do this
Hmm.
they do this, um, what makes it work for them, and can I create that for me? And if I'm doing that, why not also try to create it for as many people as possible?
Yeah, love that. Love that. It sounds like your mom's incredible and somebody that you've learned a lot from, and watching her do that firsthand. And also being in tech, you see a lot of different strategies that people take to kind of make it all work, or like you said, be successful. One thing that I've definitely learned from a lot of leaders that has really helped me navigate this intersection of life and work is the invitation to buy back time. And I've always really focused on trading my time to earn a living or leveraging the money that I have to invest and get more money. But this idea of trading my money to buy back time was a really important teaching from other leaders around me that was such great advice. And for us, that has led to the whole au pair pathway. That's been a big part of our family journey over the last 3 or 4 years. What has been some of the most meaningful learnings that you've had from some of the leaders that you've been around in tech or outside of tech that are really doing a great job managing the intersection of these two things? And sometimes the form of that advice or things you learn is from watching what not to do too.
Yeah, I think that what you mentioned about buying back your time is super valuable. It's obviously something that we believe in at Sundays, and we think that we can help people get back some of their most valuable time, both for work and for their families. Other things have really been around like mindset that I think is really interesting. I think a lot of leaders who I've talked to, they're some of like the smartest people that I've ever met, but they still find it really hard. And just knowing that other people out there are finding it hard, I think is really valuable because I feel like we set ourselves up of like, this is what success is, and those people are doing it really well, and I'm the only one who's not doing it well. So understanding that like for everyone who is experiencing this, it is difficult has been kind of a really helpful understanding for me. And then also looking at what are the systems that they set up for themselves that help.
Mhm.
So whether that's internal home systems, sharing responsibilities with their partners, or buying back time, I think there's kind of these different levels of ways that people approach thinking about it in a more strategic way so that they can set themselves up um, to live the lives that they want longer term that are really interesting. And I have tried to implement them even without kids, but I'm super excited
Yeah,
going into this next period. Maybe not the immediate next period where I think it will just be
sure.
incredibly hectic, but after that, where we can set up ourselves for more long-term success and having systems that work.
I love that. Yeah, just the recognition that like systems are a thing when it comes to managing your family. If I think about it, there was a podcast I recorded a couple months ago just talking about how, a lot of family systems are kind of like the equivalent of Windows 95. It's like the same operating system our parents used, which is
Mhm.
in many cases like not an operating system. It's just kind of defaulting, getting through it all. But there's so much pressure right now, right? Where I think the relevancy of systems is so critical and great of you to be able to practice that before you get to a spot where the pressure continues to build. And I love that mindset piece of just recognizing that it's hard for everybody. And I think it's an important piece too to not feel like we have to enjoy it all the time.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
feel like sometimes there's this implied idea that like you have to really enjoy parenting and working and doing all the things, and if you're not, something's wrong. It's like, no, like this is really tough. You don't have to enjoy it
Mhm.
every single day. As an
Yeah.
important mindset, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's like something I've been taking from starting a company towards parenthood is that it is really hard. And a lot of the success that you feel or like happiness is like looking back. I mean, there is happiness day to day, but there's also really big challenges. And sometimes
Hmm.
the days or the week are is really difficult. But when you look backwards, you're like, wow, look at all these things that I learned and I accomplished getting here. And then if you're a person who likes to challenge yourself, you're like, okay, here's a new challenge. And I know I can address this because I've done it before in similar situations. And I think, obviously, I'm not a parent yet, but I think that from many of the parents that I've talked to, there are very similar things where it is really hard at times, but you're also getting to enjoy both the small day to day moments and this overall journey that you're on.
Yeah, I mean, going back to your point around like systems, having your own system or process of just navigating the world, right? Having kids just increases the pain lines that you kind of bump up against, but having your own system in a business is a great way of challenging yourself to do that. In many cases, when you birth your own business, it's like you have your own child anyway with Sundays, right? So let's not kid ourselves. I'm wondering, building systems, buying back time, it's something that's really resonated with you, obviously, and you're in the business of that, of offering executive assistance for ambitious parents. I was going to ask you the question, like, what's working really well for your family right now? But I think it's actually a really unique opportunity to ask you when you look at a meta level, the hundreds of families that you're working with right now, what's working really well for them? Like, what are you noticing as something that maybe you did not expect or see as being so important? But now that you're so immersed in these families and playing such a critical role, recognized the value and the impact that it's making.
Yeah, I think that there's two kind of very different areas. One of them is the relationships that we are able to build with families and how important those relationships are. I think every
Hmm.
family is really unique in how they want their family to be. And so, really understanding deeply like these are people and they have goals, they have different values for what's important to them. Their kids are people as well, and they have thoughts about how they want their family to be. And so, being able to understand like the diversity that we see across families is super interesting. Um,
Mm.
and I think that's working well where we have our team is it's a super relationship based model. So we have like one person who gets to know your family and they can be really thoughtful about what's important to you, what's coming up for you. And then kind of on the polar opposite of that is that there are really interesting systems that you can build that kind of work across all of these families. And we talk to families about things that they want to work well. A lot of times it's like repetitive things and families think of those repetitive things of like, oh, I have to make this phone call or sometimes something like meal planning is a great example of something that is like you have to do it every week or every day. And so it's really front of mind. But when you look across families, there's actually so many more repetitive things where we have the opportunity to build systems for them. So we see a lot of people who have like 4.5 or 5 year olds that are not usually in Spain, but they are like going into kindergarten. And that process, we can help to have a system for and create more understanding of what's coming up for both the parents and
Mm.
the child. And then we also see similar things on like an annual basis where if you think about like Christmas time last year, like it's too far apart for like most humans to be like, okay, I need a Christmas system where they're like creating a system that they're gonna use every year. But actually they run into the same things every year where they're buying
Right.
plane tickets and planning and getting gifts. And we as a company get to kind of create systems around that that are really interesting and we can help people feel prepared 6 weeks before Christmas instead of like on the 20th trying to order the last minute gifts.
Yeah, no doubt. And just as soon as those things like Christmas wrap up, I'm sure most families are just like me, where it's like, I don't want to fucking think about Christmas at all until I need to. That is done, it's behind.
Yeah.
But therein lies, I'm, perhaps overlooking just the opportunity to see, okay, like what was the system? What were the things that can make this easier next year? You're so quick to want to move on that
Mhm.
a team like yours and so focused on that, but also being able to see the patterns between families can make that so easy. I'm curious to talk to you and ask you about what you've observed in working with spouses to build systems inside of families. I've noticed that in some family dynamics and systems, there's typically one person that's like a big driver of it, right? And I've also found some families where there's a real shared leadership model where both really
Mhm.
like to be involved. Are you observing in the work that you're doing with families any significant difference between those or anything that, like I said, has really been working well for families when it comes to building capacity back to do it all?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely see both of those models that you just mentioned,
Hmm.
where there's one person who's more of the driver versus having more shared responsibility. Um, Typically, the person who's more of the driver tends to be the mom, but it
Hmm.
can go the other way. But I think that it depends what your goals are for your family. Like some families are set up where they do want one person to be the driver, and that's kind of the responsibilities that they've outlined. And I think that works totally fine when you've been explicit about it and you're like, okay, this is how we want to organize our family, and this is how we're going to divide responsibilities. I think where there are pitfalls are when you aren't explicit and like one person just kind of ends up being the default person.
Hmm.
And that can be really tough and lead to a lot of like disappointment and burnout and relationship difficulties, which she's probably helped people through, Dave. But I think that if you are in a position where both people want to have careers or things outside of the home that they're trying to focus on, then it is more helpful to have that divided responsibility. And I think there are different ways that we see that. I think most successfully, it's when people have like clear delineations of what each person is
Hmm.
responsible for. And then maybe there are some shared things, but we know like this person does all of the meal planning and all of the laundry, and this person does longer term like school planning and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
there's like shared trust and clear um, communication of like what that ownership means too.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And there's so many different ways of doing it. There's no perfect way, just like building a business, right? But it's always interesting when you're so intimately involved, like you are across families,
Hmm.
to see like the patterns and what you're noticing working really well. That's cool.
Yeah. One thing that I think is interesting is like some of the parents who I think that a lot of parents, when they are both kind of looped into communication, it can be really important. So, even if you're not the person who's like, maybe your wife is the decision maker for something, but having you be like CC'd on the email, so then like she is not responsible for communicating all of that information to you and keeping you like
Right.
you are still have responsibility to like pay attention to some things. I think that can be a big gap that I've seen with some people where it leads to frustration.
Yeah, no shit, right? Because it's one thing to do it all, but there's also the energy and care that goes into trying to keep people in the loop. And yeah, even having a third person who is not emotionally involved and taking care of a lot of those things too, like a lot of your EAs, goes a long way. Just being able to
Yeah.
simplify some of that too, I can only imagine.
Yeah. What do you see with the families that you're working with?
Yeah, it's a good question as far as what works really well. Something that I've noticed is families who are really clear on what it looks like when their kids or when their partners are disconnected. Like they've actually found a way of being able to describe and to be able to realize, like, oh, wow, we're not in a state where we can make decisions or we can push and challenge each other, like to actually understand and recognize when somebody's disconnected.
Hmm.
I mean, you can have all the facts and perspectives that might be right, but if the person's not in an emotional state to be able to engage in a conversation, whether it's around, administrative things or long-term school planning or something as simple as laundry or the needs for that, just being able to be really attuned and to track your partner to know like when somebody's in each of those states, I
Yeah.
see as being something that's so important. And we're all kind of creatures of habits. We all have our own blueprints, most of which have been built through how we've grown up. I'm like a classic avoider through and through, right? And my wife Jen is an example as somebody who's a bit more of a seeker and somebody who is a bit more anxious tendencies and will kind of gravitate towards wanting to talk more than normal about things. And just to be able to understand and identify, not from a place of judgment, but more of like observation, just to know where you are, I think is a skill that you can build. That when I see families doing that really well, it just allows everybody to be far more selective and more effective in how they work together on a lot of
Hmm.
these things. And I think the nice thing about having an EA, and we've had the au pairs live with us in the past, is having a third party in the room. I've found around these types of conversations, it's kind of like going to a group workout, Ashley. It's like I work a little harder, my technique looks a lot better, the way I talk about things and the way I take ownership for things, right, in the context of family dynamics and getting things done, having some sort of public visibility into what we do is so important. And I think about even things like private journaling versus public blogging, right? If
Yeah.
you're doing predictions or capturing what you think is going on in the world and how you're thinking privately, it's really great to be able to do that. But public exposure to what you're thinking about is great because it forces some sort of accountability where over time you start to get better and better at what you do because people are watching. And Jen and I really experienced that in our podcast, Poco a Poco, where we were sharing our journey coming to Spain. She was saying, one of the things I loved about this was how just you and I were publicly being watched in those conversations and how much we grew through that. So I think there's great merit in having a third person, whether it's a Sunday EA or an au pair or somebody as a part of these processes too, to really force our accountability and bringing our best to those types of moments. Because those are critical conversations that happen on repeat, where the ability to do it well has a big impact on how everything goes and how we feel about each other in that moment, too, right? And yeah, those are things that I've seen. Does that resonate? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I love that. And I think also like just human nature is like the people you love the most, you're like the most comfortable with. And so sometimes you're not your best self with them, but having a third person there makes you be like, okay, how do I want to show up in front of the world, which is super valuable. We actually have seen, I think I mentioned this last time, a lot of one of our favorite things to do is actually run like a family meeting with the parents that we work with. So we've been
Yeah.
doing, we often do it on Fridays. It'll be like a Friday family meeting to prep for next week where both partners will be there. Our team will take responsibility of like running through the schedule, but also talking about like, okay, who's going to be driving this kid to soccer? Who's taking this kid to gymnastics at the same time? Or just like, what are we having for dinner? And then like their list of upcoming things. And I think it's helpful to have someone else who is like the project manager and kind of making sure these things are on track for you. And then parents can give input or they can find out places where they weren't aligned on what was
Yeah.
coming up too, but not necessarily in a negative way. It's just like, okay, like now we're all aware of this and it's out in front of us, so we can problem solve instead of feeling like emotional or unemotional reaction to
Yes.
how it was handled.
Well, especially for the type of person that you're working with who's extremely ambitious, it's kind of nice not to have to be the coach and the player at the same time. Like, yes, you can run your
Mm-hmm.
family meeting, but to just be a part of a family meeting is quite lovely, where you can just be a participant in this. You don't have to take
Yeah,
notes. You don't have to do everything that kind of comes with that, right? And you can
yeah,
just be in it instead of having to lead it all the time.
yeah. And I think a lot of them are coming from situations where they've been leading all day, and so
Yeah,
it's nice to be able to take a little bit of a passenger seat for a bit.
no kidding. No kidding. Um, As far as things you're trying to figure out, I'm curious. You're stepping into a wonderful new chapter for your family. What are you trying to figure out right now for yourself and for the families that you work with?
Yeah. I think I changed my answer since last time we talked, since I'm getting closer to having to being in this myself. But one thing that I am really thinking about is like what mindset I want to be in as a parent. I think that I take this very like achievement oriented mindset to almost everything that I do. And I know that um that might not be setting myself up for success as a parent if I'm like so worried about like achieving things. I had this actually really great I'm going into parental leave. I'm hoping to take about 2 months off. And I've been like really focused on setting up the company for success going into that. I'm like, here's this very meticulous plan of like these people are responsible for these things. Like everybody's been trained on how to do it. And I feel very confident on that. And then I went into this really great coaching session where someone was like, okay, now what are your intentions for like how you want to experience leave? And I was like, oh, I hadn't really thought about the bad part.
Mm,
And so thinking about at least these next 2 months, I'm like, okay, I just really want to be present. I don't want to be trying to like achieve something. I don't know how much you can achieve in the first couple of weeks, but um, I think that I want to just like kind of experience it, let myself soak it in, figure out what this new identity is personally. Um, and then also think about like as a parent overall, I feel like if you're always trying to push things, you're kind of losing out on something that's really important and valuable. So I'm trying to think more personally about like, do I, what is, how does that differ from my normal mindset of like myself at work and how do I want to approach that?
yeah, especially knowing where your roots come from as being really achievement oriented, right? And having a process that's really good around
Mm-hmm.
that. That makes a lot of sense. There's a question that really has helped me navigate similar moments to that. And I remember spending some time when we were expecting to have William to try and take some extended time off myself. And somebody had asked me, how do you want to feel? I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, that's such a different way of thinking about how I define success in this and how I'm decorating my life to be able to accomplish something. It's like a feeling that I want to have. Okay, it's very different than like what do I want to get done and what are the things that I want to be able to
Yeah.
do, right? Instead of how do I want to feel through this. And I remember once I got really clear on what the answer to that was, I was like, wow, what a lovely design constraint for my
Mm-hmm.
life right now around this that was so appropriate for that stage. But that's so exciting. And how about families? I mean, you're really focused right now on EAs for families, helping them run family meetings, doing a ton with them. But the frontier of where you're going next and what you're trying to figure out to help families further. What does that look like? Or are you at a stage right now where it's like, hey, we've got the solid business model. You've now recently hit, I think it was a million ARR as a
Hmm.
business, which is a huge milestone. Is it like, let's just catch a breath? Let's actually allow our business to absorb the success and growth that we've had, take a break? Or are you actively working on the next thing when it comes to trying to help families and determining how you can do that as a company?
Yeah, I mean, we are always thinking about the next thing as well. I think that right now we help families in kind of the family management. We also help people who have started their own businesses where we'll be more holistic around their support. So we'll understand like their
Oh,
to-do list is both business and family, and everything is constrained by 24 hours. And so where can we jump in to help them get their most valuable time back there? I think what we are there are definitely areas that we are excited about growing our business potentially, which might be like benefits that companies offer their teammates. And we're also curious about doing some in person stuff. But I would say what we're really focused on right now is just making what we do today as good as it can be. And
yeah.
one of the things I think is most interesting is like we have a lot of families that come to us and they're in this super overwhelmed state, I think, because they're doing so much, obviously. But they're not quite ready to like take that delegation step, or they don't know how to delegate. And so putting a lot of work into how do we actually like teach people the skills that they need to delegate and help them think through like what things are they okay letting go of? What does that actually mean? And taking those first kind of steps in their usually in their first couple months of working with us to get really comfortable handing things off to other people so that they can start to get their time back.
Well, that is, I love hearing your excitement around that because you and I both know, you know, even I've struggled with this. You can know exactly what you should do when it comes to delegating, but it's like kind of putting the gas pedal down as soon as you want to go and do that. It's like you hit the fucking brake at the exact same time and you don't do it. And there's this like
Yeah.
hidden anxiety management system that's at play. And there's the obvious piece of like teaching how to hand things off and then overcoming that internal anxiety management system too
Hmm.
is such a complex and real part of how you guys are helping families. That's so great. I'm excited to hear how you and your team start to contribute in that. And you've no doubt experienced that resistance up front in
Yeah.
onboarding new families. Yeah, so far.
Yeah, it's really funny. Actually, so I have Sunday's person helped me internally as an EA, which forces me to kind of practice all of these things myself. But
Yeah.
she just started, we just had an internal person helping our like head of operations. And she helps families every day with these things, but she's so personally resistant to like, she's like, I don't have time to onboard them. I don't have time to think about what to give them. And I'm like, this is exactly the issue that we're running into. Like, you are the problem customer, which I think is actually great practice for us, and we'll learn a lot.
Yeah. So good. Shoemaker's child, right? Easy to help
Yes.
somebody else with it, but hard to do it yourself.
Yeah.
How would an ambitious parent who is feeling overwhelmed with everything start to explore if the team at Sundays could help them?
Yeah. So if you want to find me, as Dave mentioned, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So if you look up Ashley Chang Sundays, I'm there. I will share tips pretty regularly about what we do to help all families and systems that we're building. So if that's kind of where you want to get started, that's a great place to connect. And then if you are feeling like you're ready for the next step, our website is withsundays.com, and we take a super personal approach. So we have a call with every single person that ends up working with our team. And we're happy to just talk to you about what it might be like, talk through what you're facing. And even if Sunday's not the right solution, we have thought a lot about how we can help families. So we're happy to direct you towards what we think is best. And if you want to work with us, we always love working with more families too.
So good. Well, excited to continue following along on LinkedIn as I have been. But I would say more importantly and interestingly is hearing how your next 2 or 3 months go starting this new chapter. Wishing you the utmost best in those weeks ahead. They're so precious and can't wait to be able to see some pictures and just hear some stories of what those first few experiences are like for you and your husband and your family. So good. Thank you for making time and space for this as you're getting so close. How far out are we now from the due date?
A week and a half. So getting
A
there
week and a
very
half.
soon.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Well, how lucky are we? Thank you so much, Ashley.
Thank you, Dave. Have a great day.